Hello everyone, I am Devin Kim, the English instructor of IBSEPT, and today I'll be introducing to you tips and strategies for effectively dealing with the English A Language and Literature Paper 1. The Paper 1 is the non-literary external assessment component of the English A Language and Literature course. It consists of two previously unseen non-literary texts, each from a distinct text type. This table shows you the list of text types you can expect to find on the Paper 1. I have highlighted the text types that appear most frequently, so focusing on these text types will help you prepare and practice more effectively for the Paper 1. Each Paper 1 text has a guiding question, which focuses on specific aspects of the text. Your Paper 1 response must always circle back to this guiding question because answering it is the purpose of the Paper 1 assessment. Students may also provide an alternative point of focus, but this requires you to justify why you choose to analyze a text in that given direction. Given this additional step, I personally do not recommend doing this because this may prove more difficult and time-consuming. Paper 1 consists of 35% of your total grade at both SL and HL. At SL, the score weighting is almost evenly balanced across the three assessment components, but at HL, Paper 1 is the single largest grading component. Therefore, HL students, especially those who are preparing for their final examinations, will find it more advantageous to focus more on the Paper 1 than they do on the Paper 2. When practicing for the Paper 1, one must always keep in mind these four criteria. A. Understanding and interpretation. B. Analysis and evaluation. C. Focus on the organization. And D. Language. Each criteria is worth 5 points, adding up to a total of 20 possible points as the maximum score you can get for a single Paper 1 response. So SL students, maximum score for Paper 1 is 20. HL students who will be writing 2 responses will be marked out of a total of 40 points. Now, let's look at what each criterion demands for the student. Criterion A is simply a measure of how well you understood the Paper 1 text itself. This involves both the surface level meanings of the text and the implicit or implied messages it contains as well. To get a good score on Criterion A, you want to involve a lot of critical thinking, a lot of close observation. Those two skills will help you get a high score in this criterion. Criterion B tests your knowledge of text types and their features and conventions. So, brush up on the various text types you have learned during your IB course. Remind yourself of what features they have in particular. Advertisements, speeches, editorials, online articles, you name it. The more terminology, the more specific terminology you can incorporate into your response, the better your Criterion B score will be. Criterion C assesses how well organized your essay is. What that means is your Paper 1 response has a coherent, well-structured, set of paragraphs with appropriate connective phrases both between the sentences and between paragraphs as well. A strong introduction with a clear thesis statement and a conclusion that evaluates the text as a whole. Criterion D is a measure of linguistic proficiency. This means that your grammar is highly accurate, your vocabulary is varied and sophisticated, your tone and register formal and appropriate, and that your sentences vary in length and complexity, showing your mastery of the English language. Now, let's quickly go over timekeeping strategies for the Paper 1. If you're an SL student, you'll have 5 minutes of reading time followed by 75 minutes to write one essay response and analyzing one of 2 Paper 1 texts you're given. In the 5 minutes reading time, you'll be reading both texts. keep in mind that you read the guiding question of the text before you read the text itself. So read the guiding question first, then you go through the text, followed by the next text. Again, guiding question first, the text. In the 5 minutes, you should have read both texts and have an idea of which of the two you would like to address and write a response to. And once you've done that, you'll spend about 20 to 25 minutes simply planning and structuring out your response, followed by 45 to 50 minutes of writing. HL students, time management is going to be slightly different. 5 minutes of reading time, 135 minutes, 2 hours and 15 minutes to write 2 responses to 2 separate paper 1 texts. During the 5 minutes of reading time, HL students will not bother reading both texts. They will simply focus on one text. Again, read the guided question first, then read through that text itself carefully. And in your head, you're already annotating that text during that reading time, so that as soon as the exam begins, you can put those thoughts on the paper, annotating it rapidly. And then that'll be followed by 15 to 20 minutes of just, again, brainstorming and planning out one response. When that is done, instead of writing up that first response, what HL students will do, you will move on straight to planning and structuring out the second paper 1 text. And only when you're done planning out both responses, that should take you anywhere from 40 to 45 minutes, that is when you can begin writing up your response. So remember, for both SL and HL, only after you've done planning out your essay should you begin writing. Spending so long on planning may sound counterintuitive, but that is what makes or breaks your paper 1. If you know what every sentence of your response is going to be about, the write-up becomes so much easier. And not having to worry about what to write next frees up your mind, frees up your attention, so you can focus more on criterion D. As we said, grammar, vocab, sentence construction, and tone. This is timekeeping strategy for paper 1 at both SL and HL. Now we're going to be looking quickly at an ideal paper 1 structure. So it will have an introduction, followed by 3 to 4 body paragraphs, each paragraph focusing on an aspect of the text that is relevant to answering the guiding question, followed by a conclusion. Altogether, your paper 1 should be ideally between 700 to 900 words. I consider this the sweet spot because this is a good balance between detailed analysis and coherence. I find that generally student responses that go beyond 1,000 words kind of suffer on coherence. They lose focus the longer the essay response becomes. So 700 to 900 words, remember that is your target word count. And now, let's go over the 4-step process for effectively dealing with the paper 1. You'll have noticed how much I emphasize planning, so this is a more detailed overview of how a paper 1 should be planned and structured and then written up. But the first step for the paper 1 is to divide the guiding question into its constituent demands. So let's look at this guiding question taken from the November 2021 paper 1. How and to what effect is tone used to express the author's opinion in this column? You can see that this guiding question can be divided into 2 parts. How and to what effect tone is used in the text and the opinions expressed by the author. Either of these 2 constituent demands are equally viable as paragraph points. It is up to you to decide which one to use. A bit more on that after step 2. One thing to note, even if the guiding question expresses a concept in the singular form, such as author's opinion, you will always treat it as if it were written in the plural form. So you can see how here I've written opinions expressed by the author instead of opinion, singular. So once you do that, step 2, I call it the brainstorming step. This is where you're identifying textual features and brainstorming ideas, coming up with your interpretations of the paper 1 text. And you'll be targeting criteria A and B at this step. So, once you'll probably be more familiar with the word annotation. And yeah, this is where you're annotating the text in order to create your ideas about it. When you're done with this, you'll have a good idea of which of the two constituent demands you want to use as your body paragraph points. The tip is, whichever the constituent demand you choose, you want to ensure that you can come up with as many distinct ideas as the number of body paragraphs you want to write. So, let's say you choose this constituent demand as your body paragraph points. In that case, you want to be able to discuss 3 distinct opinions expressed by the author in that text. Vice versa, if you want to talk about tone as your topic sentences of the body paragraphs, you want to ensure that you have identified at least 3 distinct tones used in the text. Back to step 2. This is a rapid fire process. It should take you no more than 10 minutes. This is where your mind is working as quickly as possible. And when you're done with that, you move on to step 3, paragraph structuring, which I consider the most important part of this 4-step process. So this is where you're organizing all of the ideas generated in step 2 into coherent body paragraph structures using the PO paragraph structure: point, evidence, explanation, and link. Step 3 includes a number of smaller steps, such as appropriately wording the point sentence of each paragraph, categorizing the features you found, and explaining their effect on the audience, so evidence, explanation. You also want to create strong link sentences that either tie back to the main question or briefly evaluate how well the features discussed in each body paragraph help achieve the text's purpose. Keep in mind, full sentences are not required in this stage, but make sure you write down all the keywords and phrases that come to mind. This you should be spending at least 10 minutes on for each response. Carefully organize your ideas into body paragraphs. This will help you a lot when it comes to step 4, the write-up. That is where you combine everything. Here's where you're writing down your ideas into paragraph form, into sentences, using appropriate connective phrases to establish a clear logical progression or flow throughout your essay. The introduction and conclusion are also part of step 4 because you can only write those two once you know what your body paragraphs are going to be about. I will now briefly cover what both the paper 1 introduction and conclusion should look like. The paper 1 introduction looks something like this. The core aspect of the introduction is the context, the audience, the purpose, and the features of the paper 1 text. Those 4 are the main ideas you want to include in your introduction. Some teachers demand students to write a topical, catchy hook sentence at the very beginning of their paper 1 response that explains the relevance of the topic to our modern world. In that case, that is how you can incorporate it. Vice versa, some other teachers demand students to connect their paper 1 text to a global issue and or one of the 7 central course concepts of the IB English A Lang & Lit course. In that case, look at what I've highlighted below, so you can just use one of these terms, incorporate it into your paper 1 introduction. That being said, the core elements of the paper 1 are context, audience, purpose, and features in that order. The thesis statement of your paper 1 combines the purpose and the features of a paper 1 text. So normally, in a thesis statement, you'll be listing 3 points that sum up each body paragraph. Thus, You can only write a strong thesis statement once you know what your body paragraphs will be about. The paper 1 conclusion is relatively simpler. Here, you only have to do 2 things. Restate and simplify the thesis statement, and then evaluate the text based on your observations of its target audience and or purpose. So, to better understand that, here are some questions you can ask yourself for that second sentence of the conclusion. Is there a certain feature in that paper 1 text that you feel was not appropriate for the text's target audience? Vice versa. Was there a feature that you felt reflects a very good understanding of the text's target audience? Is the text achieving its overall purpose well? By discussing such questions in the conclusion, you can wrap up your paper 1 response confidently and effectively, while providing insight, personal insight. As a final note, always remember that the paper 1 is written for clarity. Your examiner is not going to spend more than a few minutes reading over your response. Therefore, you want to ensure that every sentence is easily readable and conveys an observation, idea, or insight about the paper 1 text being dealt with. So, with that, we wrap up today's overview of the English A Language and Literature Paper 1. Thank you for watching.